Alan Ladd hated him more than anyone else. Theodore Allen Walbridge Ladd was born on September 3, 1913, in Hot Springs, Arkansas. His life was hard from the start. When Alan was only 4, his father Alan Ladd Sr. died. In search of a better life, his mother Raleigh moved the family to Oklahoma City and then to California. Ladd had money problems and emotional problems as a child, like being malnourished all the time, which made him short as an adult. He grew short and is now only 5 feet 6 inches tall. Even though he was small, he showed a lot of inner strength and drive. Ladd was good at sports in high school, especially swimming and diving. He was also interested in acting from a young age and took theater classes at North Hollywood High School, from which he graduated in 1934. Because he was attractive and looked like an All-American, he was able to get jobs as a grip and extra in Hollywood studios. He slowly gained experience behind the scenes while longing for a chance to be in front of the camera. Ladd's path to becoming an actor was slow and full of turns down. In the 1930s, he did a lot of different odd jobs, such as being a radio speaker and a carpenter. In the late 1930s and early 1940s, he played small parts and parts that weren't recognized, and taller, stronger actors often made him look less important. Sue Carroll, a talent director who would later become his wife, found him and gave him his big break. Carroll saw his ability and worked hard to make people aware of it. Ladd's career took off when he played the mysterious and mentally complicated hitman Raven in This Gun for Hire in 1942. His scary but sympathetic performance made a big splash and started a new age for film noir. Fans and critics alike were fascinated by Ladd's moody appearance, his striking blue eyes, and his quiet, understated intensity. A character that was different from the loud, brash heroes of the time. He became famous very quickly after making this movie. Alan Ladd became one of Paramount Pictures' most bankable stars after this movie. In the 1940s and early 1950s, he was the star of a string of hit movies that cemented his place in Hollywood. Some of the most famous ones are The Glass Key, 1942, The Blue Dahlia, 1946, and Kolkata, 1947. In these movies, he often played tough but decent men who are in tough moral situations. These parts shaped the idea of the lone anti-hero that would become common in American movies. Ladd often worked with actress Veronica Lake, who was a great co-star because of her small size and calm personality. Their acting together on screen made them a popular Hollywood pair and helped sell more tickets. Their roles together in several great noir and mystery movies will live on forever. Ladd's most famous role may have been in the 1953 Western Shane, which was directed by George Stevens. Ladd gave a performance that was both powerful and deeply moving as Shane, a quiet gunfighter who is trying to get away from his violent past. Both audiences and reviewers loved how he played a reluctant hero who was torn between duty and peace. Shane went on to become one of the most famous Western actors in movie history. Many people will never forget the scene at the end of the movie where a hurt Shane rides off into the mountains while a boy cries, "Come back, Shane." Ladd had a lot of problems as his work went on, even though he was successful. By the late 1950s and early 1960s, Hollywood had changed its tone and style, and his star began to fade. It was hard for him to get parts that were as good as the ones he had done before. He also had problems with depression, his health, and becoming more and more dependent on booze and prescription drugs. Even though he kept acting and even tried making movies, like Drumbeat, 1954, and Hell on Frisco Bay, 1955. Different critics and readers liked and didn't like his later works. But he never stopped working, and he was committed to his job until the end. In 1964, he had his last movie part in The Carpetbaggers, which many critics saw as a touching farewell to a man who had once been a huge star in Hollywood. Alan Ladd married Marjorie Jane Midge Harold for the first time. They had known each other since they were kids. They were high school sweethearts, and their relationship showed the honest love of two young people looking for security and friendship in a world full of uncertainty. In October 1936, they got married. At that time, Ladd was still having trouble making it as an actor in Hollywood. His early years in the movie business were hard and full of failure. But MIJ was always a part of his life and helped him feel better as he tried to break into a business that is known for being unstable. On October 22, 1937, they had their only child together, a son named Alan Ladd Jr. This kid would go on to make a big name for himself in the movie business. Not as an actor like his father, but as a very powerful producer and studio boss. He is best known for giving the go-ahead to famous movies like Star Wars while he was at 20th Century Fox. Ladd and Midget's marriage was not meant to last, even though they had a son together and had a past together. In the end, they broke up because of differences in their personal lives and the pressures of Ladd's work, which was picking up speed by the early 1940s. In July 1941, they got a divorce. After they broke up, MIJ went on with her life and finally got married again. But she died too soon in 1957, and that was the end of her life. Reportedly still pretty young, ending the relationship with the woman who had been a part of Ladd's formative years in both personal and business ways. During his second and longest marriage, Alan Ladd was married to Sue Carroll. She had a huge impact on both his personal and business life. Sue Carroll, whose real name was Evelyn Lederer, used to be an actor. She had a short but successful career in silent movies. But by the time she met Ladd, she had changed her name and was now a star agent and manager in Hollywood. Carroll saw Ladd's potential and helped shape his early career by tirelessly promoting him and providing him with the breakthrough parts that made him one of the most bankable stars of the 1940s and 1950s. From being friends for work, they became romantically involved, and on March 15, 1942, in Mexico City, they got married. But there were some legal issues that made this first wedding more difficult. Before Ladd married Carroll, his divorce from MIJ Harold wasn't completed. This meant that the marriage was illegal in the United States. The couple planned to get married again legally in the United States in July of that year, after all the legal issues were taken care of. Even though things were a little off at first, they were always committed to each other, and they stayed together until Ladd's unexpected death in 1964. Before she got married, Sue Carroll had a daughter named Carol Lee, who was born on July 18, 1932. Alan Ladd loved being a dad, and he and Sue raised Carol Lee as if she were part of their new family. People knew that their home life was safe and steady, even though it was kept secret from the public. It was a safe place for the boys to go after being in the rough and unpredictable world of show business. They had 2 children of their own as well. Alana Ladd, their daughter, was born on April 21, 1943, while Ladd was in the U.S. Army fighting in World War II. Alana would later follow in her parents' path by being in a number of movies in the 1960s and 1970s, often with her father or in movies about him. David Ladd, their youngest child, was born in 1947 and went on to work as an actor and make movies. As a kid, David was in a number of movies, including The Proud Rebel, 1958, which starred his father. Later, he moved on to jobs behind the scenes, which added to the Ladd family's long-lasting influence on Hollywood. Alan and Sue worked well together, and Carol, who knew a lot about how Hollywood works and managed Ladd's business, made the team even stronger. Their marriage lasted for more than 20 years, through Ladd's personal struggles with depression and long-term health problems, the stresses of fame, and the pressures of the movie business. Sue Carroll was Ladd's devoted wife and fierce guardian of his memory and their children, especially Alan Ladd Jr., long after he died. Would be a great addition to the family name in the show business. Alan Ladd was known in Hollywood for having a quiet, professional attitude and being calm on set. However, there was one person in the film business who was able to break through that calm exterior and start a deep, lasting feud. Jack Palance. People who knew Ladd well knew that he hated Palance more than anyone else he had met in his work. There was a bad taste in Ladd's mouth for the rest of his life because of their fight at work and in their personal lives. Their dislike for each other goes back to the famous and tense time they spent working together on the 1953 Western Shane. Ladd played the mysterious and quiet shooter Shane, and Palance played the scary hired gun Jack Wilson. Their relationship was tense on screen, and their final fight is still thought to be one of the most exciting scenes in Western film history. But their dislike for each other wasn't just playing. It was based on a real-life fight. Alan Ladd was known for being quiet and almost reclusive. He was also very careful with his acts and felt very strongly about his height. Ladd was only 5 feet 6 inches, so he often had to use clever camera angles, custom shoes, and well-thought-out blocking to make sure he didn't look noticeably shorter than his co-stars. Jack Palance, on the other hand, was a big, rough-looking guy who was over 6 feet tall and whose presence the Ladd said he found both intimidating and rude. Palance was known for method acting and getting fully into his roles. When he wasn't on camera, he didn't try to tone down his natural intensity, which made things worse. Several people on the set say that Ladd thought Palance was trying to scare him on purpose, not just for his part but also to show who was in charge behind the scenes. Some crew members remembered that Palance would often break the rules during rehearsals or even during takes by standing too close to Ladd, staring at him for too long, or saying his lines in a way that seemed more like he was trying to scare him than act. Palance is said to have fired a gun too close to Ladd's ear during a take in a famous event, which Ladd saw as either careless or an act of disrespect. Ladd never forgot it, whether he meant to or not. Ladd also didn't like what he saw as Palance's pride. Even though Ladd was famous, he was humble about his work and believed in being professional and polite. Palance, on the other hand, walked with a cocky confidence and style that Ladd saw as arrogance. Ladd is said to have told a friend that Palance was the worst person he had ever had to work with. Aside from a few scenes together, Ladd felt like he was walking on a tightrope because he didn't like conflict and couldn't stand Palance's attitude. What made things worse was how people treated Shane after he was freed. Numerous critics and fans were captivated by Palance's chilling performance as the villain. His portrayal of Jack Wilson became one of the most memorable in Western film history and even earned him an Academy Award nod. Ladd's act was also praised, but he was said to feel overshadowed. Some people think that the praise Palance got made Ladd even more angry because it made him think that the person he hated the most was getting rewarded for torturing him in real life and in movies. The anger stuck around. Even though they never worked together again, Ladd never talked about Shane when Palance's name came up in interviews. People who knew Ladd well remembered that when Palance was brought up, he would change the subject or give short, vague answers. Some even said that Ladd wouldn't watch the movie after he got older because it made him think of the hard beginning. It wasn't often that Alan Ladd felt this way, he didn't usually hold grudges or start fights. Because it was so out of character for him, his dislike of Jack Palance stood out. The fact that he never made peace with Palance and never said in public that he liked him as an actor shows how much he disliked him. Ladd will never forget his time with Palance. It taught him that sometimes the chemistry between two actors on screen comes from real dislike, not friendship. In the end, their famous fight on screen may have helped Shane become famous for a long time, but behind the scenes, it was a sign of a personal feud that never went away. Alan Ladd didn't have many enemies, but Jack Palance was the only person he really hated. He would always remember that name. In January 1964, famous actor Alan Ladd was looking for some time to rest and recover. He was best known for his parts in classic movies like Shane and This Gun for Hire. He was said to have hurt both knees recently in a fall and was hoping that a stay at his home in Palm Springs, California, with its warm and peaceful weather would help him heal. Ladd had been dealing with serious health problems and mental stress for a long time. This injury added to his growing list of health problems that were starting to affect both his body and his spirit. Palm Springs, where he owned land and often went to get away from the bright lights of Hollywood, gave him the peace and quiet he was looking for. Alan Ladd wasn't seen living by anyone after the morning of January 29, 1964. At around 10 a.m., the maid remembered seeing him lying on his bed. At the time, nothing seemed strange, and there was no reason to be worried right away. But when the butler came back a few hours later, around 3:30 p.m., he found something very bad. The boy was still in bed and not moving. When looked at more closely, it was heartbreakingly clear that Ladd had died sometime in the hours that had passed. His quick death and the way it happened shocked people in the entertainment business and among his many loyal fans. According to the formal report, Alan Ladd died of cerebral edema, which is a swelling of the brain caused by a severe overdose of several drugs. The lab report showed that the substance was a mix of alcohol, a barbiturate, and 2 different tranquilizers. These tranquilizers all have strong effects on the central nervous system that slow it down. Even though none of the drugs were taken in amounts that would have killed someone on their own, when they were mixed together, they made a dangerous cocktail. In the end, medical experts said that his death was an accident. People thought that Ladd hadn't meant to kill himself, but had instead misread how the drugs he had become dependent on would affect him. Ladd had been dealing with chronic insomnia for years, which made it hard for him to sleep and threw off his mental balance. Like many people in Hollywood at the time, he used drugs to help him sleep, which became a problem that got worse over time. His health was in a fragile and dangerous balance because of the stresses of fame, personal demons, and a history of depression, which was made worse by his use of alcohol as a self-medication tool. In the months before he died, he seemed more and more alone and worn out, according to friends and co-workers who knew him. Alan Ladd's funeral was on February 1, 1964, and family, close friends, and people in the movie business who had respected or worked with him were there. People who had worked with or known him directly felt a deep sense of loss, which showed in the solemn and respectful ceremony. Edmund O'Brien, a longtime friend and fellow actor, gave the eulogy and spoke highly of Ladd's ability, kindness, and quiet dignity. Fans were allowed to see his coffin, which was a touching act that touched many people's hearts. It gave everyone a chance to say goodbye to the star who had once graced their screens with stoic grace and rough charm. He was buried with 2 very important things. His wedding ring, which showed how much he loved and was committed to his wife Sue Carroll, who was an actor and his longtime agent, and a letter from his teenage son David Ladd that was full of love. The letter was an intimate conversation between a loving father and son, full of hunger and love. It was a final link that Alan Ladd would always have with his father. These close touches showed how much love he had for those closest to him, even though he was quietly going through a lot of trouble inside. Alan Ladd died a rich and successful man, even though he had a hard life. His estate included a 5,000-acre ranch in Hidden Valley. This lush and large property showed how much he loved open space and the peace and quiet of the country. He also owned a hardware shop in Palm Springs. This small, unassuming business showed how practical he was and how much he wanted to build a solid financial base outside of acting. These holdings showed that, despite his problems, he had been responsible and strategic with his job and money. The movie The Carpetbaggers came out not long after he died. Ladd played Nevada Smith in this movie version of Harold Robbins's best-selling book. This character would later be the basis for a prequel movie starring Steve McQueen. The Carpetbaggers did well at the box office and was a familiar reminder of how appealing and memorable Ladd was on screen. His reputation took on a bittersweet tone when the movie became a hit. It made people think of what he had brought to American movies and what he had lost too soon.